When the object was first detected on October 19, 2017, it was labeled as a mere curiosity, fragment from the depths of space that had wandered into our solar system. Initially, scientists believed it to be a comet or an asteroid, but it was neither. Named Oumuamua, Hawaiian for scout or messenger, it exhibited none of the usual behaviors expected from such celestial bodies. There was no visible tail of gas or dust, no signs of ice sublimating from its surface. Instead, it moved with eerie precision, rotating every 7.3 hours and tumbling through space in a manner that defied explanation. But what truly captivated the scientific community was its path. Unlike the elliptical orbits of asteroids and comets bound to the sun, Oumuamua was on a hyperbolic trajectory, a rare arc that ensured it would never return. It was as if this object was a visitor, on a one-way journey from some distant star system. And then there was its shape. Unlike any natural object we had encountered before, Oumuamua was elongated, more like a cigar or a needle than a rock, measuring about 800 meters in length but only 80 meters wide. Its dark, reddish hue, likely the result of cosmic radiation exposure over millions of years, added to its mystery. As it passed through the solar system, Oumuamua began to behave even more strangely. It accelerated slightly, as though propelled by some unseen force. Scientists scrambled to explain this anomaly. Perhaps it was outgassing, a jet of material being expelled from its surface like a comet, but no gas or dust was detected. Perhaps it was a fragment of an alien spacecraft, a derelict or a probe from a distant civilization. Theories ran wild. At the forefront of the debate were three scientists: Dr. Evelyn Foster, an astrophysicist renowned for her work on interstellar objects; Dr. Alan Rodriguez, a veteran planetary scientist with NASA; and Dr. Peter Singh, an expert in extraterrestrial intelligence. Foster pushed the idea of Oumuamua being an ancient probe, its purpose lost to time. Rodriguez theorized it could be a fragment of a planetesimal ejected from a distant star system. Singh, ever the visionary, argued for the possibility that Oumuamua was a vessel, possibly still operational, on a mission of its own. Their debates were intense and their disagreements well documented. But in the end, they all agreed on one thing: Oumuamua was an opportunity. If there was even a slight chance it was something more than just a rock, it had to be investigated. For a select group within NASA, this was more than just a scientific curiosity. The United States military was quietly brought into the loop, recognizing the potential implications of an alien object passing so close to Earth. The mission, codenamed Stellar Wind, was approved in record time. It was a joint venture between NASA and the Department of Defense, with a classified budget and an ambitious goal: catch up to Oumuamua and uncover its secrets. The spacecraft designed for the mission was unlike anything ever built. Powered by a cutting-edge fusion drive, it could accelerate to unprecedented speeds, nearly 196,000 miles per hour, fast enough to intercept the object before it slipped out of reach. The drive was the brainchild of Dr. Sophia Chen, a leading physicist in the field of plasma dynamics, who had worked tirelessly to bring the concept from theory to reality. The fusion drive, if successful, would not only power this mission, but revolutionize space travel for decades to come. Crew chosen for this mission consisted of 4 astronauts, each selected for their expertise and ability to handle the unknown. Commander James Bennett, a veteran of deep space missions, was the team leader. His calm demeanor and sharp instincts had saved more than one mission from disaster. Lieutenant Colonel David Michaels, former U.S. Air Force test pilot, was the mission's ace in the hole. His experience with high-speed craft and his military discipline made him the perfect choice to pilot the spacecraft during the critical stages of the mission. Dr. Marcus Lee, an engineer and robotics expert, was responsible for handling the delicate task of investigating the object's surface. And finally, Dr. Evelyn Foster, an astrophysicist and the only female member of the crew, was brought on to analyze any potential signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. The day of the launch was one filled with a mix of excitement and tension. Cape Canaveral bustled with activity as technicians made final adjustments to the massive rocket that would carry the crew into orbit. The spacecraft, christened Odyssey, was a sleek, silver vessel built for both speed and endurance. Its design reflected the seriousness of its mission, with reinforced hulls, cutting-edge navigation systems, and redundancies upon redundancies for every critical system. Commander Bennett walked the crew through the final checklist, his voice steady and composed. "Remember, this is just the beginning. Once we hit orbit, that's when the real work starts." Dr. Foster, seated in her launch seat, nodded. "Understood, Commander. All systems check out on my end." Michaels, the test pilot, was running his own set of diagnostics, muttering to himself as he double-checked every indicator on his panel. Lee, the engineer, was unusually quiet, his attention focused on the complex systems that would keep them alive once they left Earth behind. As the countdown began, the crew felt the familiar hum of the rocket's engines warming up. Solid rocket boosters that would propel them into orbit were some of the most powerful ever built, designed to push Odyssey past the atmosphere in a matter of minutes. It was a brute force method, but it was necessary to overcome Earth's gravity. 10, 9, 8. The voice of Mission Control counted down, the words a ritual that each member of the crew knew by heart. 7, 6, 5. The rocket's vibrations grew more intense as the engines reached full power. 4, 3, 2, 1 ignition. With a deafening roar, the rocket surged off the launch pad, a pillar of fire and smoke trailing behind it. The crew was pressed into their seats as the G-forces took hold, the Earth falling away beneath them at an astonishing speed. Michaels kept his eyes on the control panel, every readout telling him the ship was functioning perfectly as it climbed higher and higher into the sky. "Separation of boosters in 10 seconds, Michaels reported, his voice tight with concentration. "Roger that," Bennett replied. He knew the separation was a critical point. If anything went wrong here, they would be stuck in low Earth orbit, or worse, caught in an uncontrollable spiral back to the ground. 3, 2, 1, separation, Michaels announced. The crew felt a jolt as the boosters detached, their empty shells falling away as Odyssey continued its ascent. For a brief moment, there was silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's internal systems. Then, with a smoothness that belied the complexity of the process, the spacecraft settled into orbit. "We're in orbit," Michaels confirmed, allowing himself a brief smile. "Ready to engage the fusion drive on your mark, Commander." As Odyssey drifted in low Earth orbit, crew began preparations to engage the fusion drive that would propel them toward Oumuamua. Dr. Foster conducted a final check of the ship's trajectory, ensuring that the calculations were correct. Everything had to be perfect. There would be no second chance. Meanwhile, Lee monitored the fusion reactor, confirming that all systems were nominal. "Everything looks good from here," Dr. Foster reported. "We're ready to begin the burn." "Copy that," Bennett replied. "Lieutenant Michaels, prepare to engage the fusion drive." Michaels' fingers danced across the controls as he initiated the startup sequence for the drive. A low hum filled the cabin as the reactor came online, the ship's internal systems syncing with the powerful engine. Then, without warning, alarms blared. "What's going on?" Bennett demanded, voice sharp. "Fusion drive startup sequence failed," Lee said, quickly scanning his panel. "I'm seeing a fault in the magnetic containment field. If we don't fix it, we won't be able to engage the drive." Bennett's mind raced. They had a narrow launch window to intercept Oumuamua. Any delay could mean missing the object entirely. "Lee, can you fix it?" "I'll need to go into the engine compartment to run a manual reset," Lee responded, already unstrapping himself from his seat. "It's a tight fit, but I can get it done." Bennett nodded. "Do it. Michaels, stand by for drive engagement as soon as Lee gives the all-clear." Lee made his way to the rear of the ship, moving with the practiced precision of someone used to working in confined spaces. The engine compartment was a maze of pipes, conduits, and electronics, all humming with latent energy. He located the faulty component, a small yet critical piece of equipment that regulated the containment field for the fusion reactor. Without it, the reactor couldn't safely generate the power needed for their journey. As Lee worked, the rest of the crew remained silent, watching the clock tick down. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, Lee's voice crackled over the comm. "Manual reset complete. Containment field is stable. You're good to go." Lee's voice crackled over the comm. "Nice work, Dr. Lee," Bennett responded. "Lieutenant Michaels, engage the fusion drive." "Engaging the drive," Michaels replied, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls. The hum from the reactor intensified. Vibrating through the hull of the ship, the fusion drive roared to life. The crew braced themselves as the spacecraft began to accelerate, pushing them further and faster than any human had ever traveled before. The sensation was unlike anything they had experienced. The force was almost imperceptible at first, but it quickly grew as the drive's power ramped up. Within moments, the ship was hurtling through space at speeds that had only been theoretical until now. The stars outside the viewport began to blur, forming streaks of light as the ship pushed toward its target. "Drive is stable," Michaels reported. "We're on course to intercept Oumuamua." "Estimated time to intercept?" Bennett asked. 9 days, 14 hours, Foster replied, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across her console. "We'll arrive with a few hours to spare before it passes beyond the reach of our solar system." Bennett nodded. The next phase of the mission would involve careful maneuvering to match Oumuamua's speed and trajectory, a task that required absolute precision. For now, though, crew had a moment to breathe. The most dangerous part of the journey was behind them, but the true challenge still lay ahead. As the days passed, crew settled into a routine. They conducted system checks, ran simulations, and prepared for the moment when they would finally come face to face with the enigmatic object. Fusion drive worked flawlessly, keeping them on course and steadily accelerating toward Oumuamua. Despite the challenges they had already overcome, the sense of anticipation grew with each passing hour. Dr. Foster spent much of her time analyzing data and refining her theories about the object. Closer they got, the more intriguing the readings became. Oumuamua was unlike any natural object she had ever studied. Its surface was strangely uniform, with no sign of the typical wear and tear one would expect from an object that had traveled through interstellar space for millions of years. There were no craters, no visible scars, just a smooth, metallic sheen that reflected the faint light of distant stars. "It doesn't make sense," Foster muttered to herself as she pored over the data. "If this thing has been traveling for as long as we think it has, it should be covered in impact craters and debris. But it's almost pristine, like it's been maintained somehow." Commander Bennett overheard her. "What are you thinking, Doctor?" Foster looked up, her eyes troubled. "I'm not sure yet, but there's something about this object that doesn't add up. I've been analyzing the rotational data, and it's almost as if the object is self-stabilizing, correcting its spin in a way that's too consistent for something natural." Bennett frowned. "Are you suggesting it's artificial?" Foster hesitated. "It's too early to say for sure, but it's a possibility we can't ignore." Commander nodded, absorbing her words. They had all known from the beginning that this mission carried risks. But the idea that Oumuamua might be something more than just a piece of space debris raised the stakes even higher. On the 9th day, the crew gathered in the command module as they neared their target. The tension was palpable. Oumuamua loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of space. Even at this distance, its elongated shape was unmistakable, stretching out like a colossal shard of metal. "We're in visual range," Michaels announced, beginning final approach. The ship's thrusters fired in precise bursts as Michaels adjusted their trajectory. The goal was to match Oumuamua's speed exactly, allowing them to fly alongside it without drifting away. It was a delicate maneuver requiring pinpoint accuracy. "Approach vector locked in," Michaels said, initiating deceleration burn. The fusion drive powered down as the thrusters took over, slowing the ship's forward momentum. The object grew larger on the view screen, revealing more details as they closed the distance. The surface appeared to be a mix of smooth, polished sections and rough, pitted areas, like a metal object that had been both carefully crafted and heavily weathered. "Looks like we found our landing zone," Bennett said, pointing to a relatively flat section of the object's side. "Prepare for EVA." Dr. Marcus Lee and Dr. Evelyn Foster suited up for the extravehicular activity, EVA. As the mission's engineer, Lee would oversee the delicate operation of cutting into Oumuamua's surface, while Foster would document and analyze any findings. Bennett and Michaels would remain aboard the ship, ready to assist as needed. The airlock cycled open with a hiss, and Lee and Foster stepped out into the emptiness of space. The ship's exterior lights illuminated the object's surface, casting long shadows across the alien terrain. With a tether connecting them to the ship, the two astronauts made their way to the selected landing zone. The surface was even stranger up close. It was metallic, but not in any way they recognized. There were no rivets, no seams, just a continuous, unbroken surface that seemed to defy explanation. Beginning analysis, Foster said, activating a handheld scanner. Composition is unusual. It's not any metal we've encountered before. High reflectivity, but incredibly dense. This could take some time to fully understand. Let's get a sample, Lee suggested. He activated the plasma cutter and carefully began to carve a small circle into the object's surface. Sparks flew as the blade met the metal, but it was slow going. The material was tough, far tougher than any natural alloy they had ever encountered. It's like cutting through solid diamond, Lee muttered, adjusting the cutter's settings. Almost there. After what felt like an eternity, cutter finally broke through. The small, circular piece of the exterior popped free, revealing a dark void beneath. The opening was narrow, but it was enough to see inside. "What do you see?" Bennett's voice crackled over the comms. Foster leaned closer, her breath catching as she peered into the opening. It's hollow. There are structures inside, definitely not natural." "Structures?" Bennett repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Are you saying?" "It's artificial," Foster confirmed, her voice trembling with excitement. "This thing, it's a vessel, a ship, or at least part of one." The significance of her words hung in the air, heavy with implications. This was no mere rock. This was a construct, built, not formed. Questions that had plagued them since Oumuamua was first detected now seemed even more pressing. Who or what had built this object? And why? "We need to get inside," Lee said, already reaching for his tools to widen the opening. "Hold on," Bennett interjected. "We need to proceed carefully. We don't know what's in there, or what kind of systems might still be operational. Let's take it slow." Foster nodded, though the urge to rush inside was overwhelming. This was the discovery of a lifetime, maybe the greatest in human history. But they couldn't afford to make mistakes. Carefully, they began to widen the opening, cutting away more of the metal to create an entry point. It took hours, process painstakingly slow as they worked to avoid damaging anything inside. Finally, the gap was large enough for them to enter. "Ready?" Lee asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Foster took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they floated through the opening and into the dark interior of the alien vessel. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing glimpses of strange shapes and structures within. It was a space unlike any they had ever encountered, alien, yet eerily familiar in some ways. As they drifted deeper into the ship, the enormity of their discovery began to sink in. This was no ordinary mission. This was first contact. "We're inside," Foster whispered, her voice almost reverent. "This is beyond anything we imagined." And with those words, they crossed the threshold into the unknown, unaware of the secrets and dangers that awaited them within the cold, silent depths of Oumuamua. Dr. Evelyn Foster's heart raced as she floated through the narrow opening they had cut into the alien vessel's hull. Her helmet's light sliced through the inky darkness, revealing a cavernous interior that seemed both hauntingly empty and impossibly vast. The walls around her were smooth, metallic, and faintly reflected, giving the eerie impression of nothingness. Lieutenant Jack Michaels followed her closely, his breath hitching in awe. "This is unreal," he whispered, his voice crackling through the comm. "We're inside an alien spacecraft. This isn't just history. We're rewriting everything." Commander Sam Bennett's voice came over the comm with a calm authority. "Stay focused, team. We're in unknown territory. Keep your wits about you and document everything." Dr. Marcus Lee, the team's engineering expert, floated in last, his plasma cutter still warm from breaching the hull. "Whatever this metal is, it's remarkable," he said, scanning the edges of the opening they had made. "It's almost as if it resisted the cut, like it was trying to heal itself." The four astronauts drifted deeper into the ship, their helmet lights sweeping across the alien architecture. The corridor they found themselves in was expansive, with walls that shimmered faintly as if imbued with some latent energy. Strange patterns, almost like runes, adorned the surfaces, their meanings lost to time. They appeared to be etched into the very fabric of the ship. weaving intricate designs that suggested a deep connection between form and function. "It's definitely artificial," Foster observed, her voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. "These patterns, they're not just decorative. I think they're some kind of circuitry, maybe even a language." "Or both," Michaels added. "Imagine if we could decipher it, we could unlock knowledge beyond our wildest dreams." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Bennett cautioned. "Our primary objective is to explore, document, and find a way to stop this ship. We can't let it drift out of our reach." They moved through the corridor, encountering more of the alien ship's mysteries. The walls were lined with strange, monolithic consoles that jutted out at odd angles, their surfaces smooth and featureless. Foster ran her gloved hand over one of them, her fingers brushing against what felt like faint, almost imperceptible ridges. "These must be control panels," she speculated. "But there's no interface, no visible means of operation. It's as if they're waiting for a touch, a command from their creators." Lee examined another console, his scanner humming softly as it tried to penetrate the dense material. No power here either. Whatever systems this ship had, they'd been dormant for a long time. As they continued, corridor opened into a larger chamber, took their breath away. The ceiling arched high above them, disappearing into shadow, while the floor was a mosaic of interlocking plates, seemed to hum with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, pillar of sorts, covered in the same intricate patterns as the walls. "What do you think this is?" Michaels asked, drifting closer to the pillar. Foster scanned it with her equipment, frowning at the readings. "It's giving off a weak electromagnetic field, but it's too faint to be functional. Maybe it was a power source or a communications relay. Or something else entirely," Bennett said. "We're dealing with technology that's beyond anything we've ever seen. We can only guess at its purpose." Their lights played across the room, revealing more details. Strange protrusions from the walls that might have been storage compartments, or maybe something more exotic. The air was still, heavy with the weight of time and forgotten memories. It was clear that this place had been dormant for eons, secrets locked away in silence. They passed through another corridor, this one lined with alcoves that might have once housed the ship's crew. The alcoves were empty now, their contents long gone, leaving only the faintest traces of dust and debris. But as they rounded a corner, their lights caught something that sent a chill through the team. There, floating in the air, were fragments of clothing, tattered, decayed pieces that clung to what could only be described as skeletal remains. The bones were long, slender, and oddly shaped, with joints and structures that defied human anatomy. They were unmistakably alien. Foster hovered near one of the remains, her voice barely above a whisper. "These bones, they're ancient, but they're not fossilized. They're unlike anything we've ever seen. This was once a living, breathing being." "What do you think happened to them?" Michaels asked, his tone hushed and reverent. "It's impossible to say," Foster replied, "but whatever it was, it wiped out the entire crew. They died here, on this ship, a long time ago." The weight of their discoveries settled over them as they continued their exploration. The sense of being in a tomb, a monument to a lost civilization, grew stronger with each passing moment. Every corner they turned, every new chamber they entered, held the echoes of a forgotten people and the tragedy that had befallen them. They passed through what might have been a common area, with strange, organic-looking structures that could have served as furniture. There were more skeletal remains here, some slumped against the walls, others floating aimlessly in the zero gravity. The remnants of the alien clothing, once vibrant, now faded and brittle, added to the somber atmosphere. "This place gives me the creeps," Michaels muttered, his gaze flitting nervously from one set of remains to the next. "It's like walking through a ghost ship." "Because that's exactly what it is," Lee said quietly. "A ghost ship adrift in the dark emptiness of space." Their path eventually led them to the heart of the vessel, bridge. The room was vast, circular, and completely dark except for the beams of their helmet light. The walls were lined with more of the strange consoles. These were arranged in a deliberate, almost ceremonial pattern. It was clear that this was the command center, the place where the ship had been controlled, or once had been. At the center of the bridge was a raised platform, surrounded by more skeletal remains. These were better preserved than the others, with fragments of clothing still clinging to their bones. They sat slumped against the consoles or lay sprawled across the floor, as if death had come suddenly, without warning. Foster drifted closer to one of the remains, her breath catching in her throat. "This must be where the crew made their last stand," she said softly. "They were here, at their posts, when whatever happened, happened." Bennett surveyed the scene with a grim expression. The whole crew was here. They never had a chance. The team moved through the bridge, their lights flickering across the darkened consoles and the lifeless remains. Foster's scanner beeped intermittently as it gathered data, recording everything for later analysis. But without power, the consoles remained dark, their secrets locked away. "We need to figure out how to stop this ship," Bennett said, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "If we can't access the systems, we'll have to find another way. Even if we could get these consoles online, there's no guarantee we'd understand their language," Lee added. "It could take years to decipher, and we don't have that kind of time." Bennett nodded slowly, his mind racing as he considered their options. "We don't need to understand their systems," he said finally. "We just need to use ours." "What are you thinking?" Michaels asked, sensing the commander's train of thought. "We weld the Odyssey to this ship," Bennett said. "Make a permanent connection. Then, we use our thrusters to slow both ships down. It's risky, but it might be the only way." "Weld the ships together?" Foster asked, surprised. "How would that work?" "We create a permanent hatch where we cut the hole," Bennett explained. "We weld bracing in several locations, attaching the two ships securely. Once we're connected, we use the Odyssey's thrusters to slow us down. It won't be easy, but it's possible." Lee frowned. "Welding to this alien metal could be a problem. It's not like anything we've encountered before. Our standard welding equipment might not be enough." "Then we improvise," Bennett said. "We use the plasma cutter. Got through the hull. Should be able to fuse the metals." "It'll be a delicate job," Lee warned. "If we don't get a solid weld, the connection could break under the stress." "We'll make it work," Bennett said firmly. "We have to. We can't let this ship drift away. There's too much at stake." The crew set to work, returning to the Odyssey to gather the necessary tools and equipment. Once back inside the alien vessel, they began the painstaking process of welding the two ships together. First step was to secure the hatch. Using the plasma cutter, Lee carefully fused the edges of the Odyssey's hull to the alien metal, creating a tight, permanent seal. It was slow, arduous work. The plasma cutter sputtered and hissed as it met the alien metal, but it held. "This metal's tough," Lee grunted as he worked. "But the plasma cutter's doing the job. We'll get this done, but it's going to take time." Michaels assisted by holding the bracing in place, his hands steady despite the weight of the task. "Just keep it steady, Marcus. We're counting on you." "I've got it," Lee assured him. "Just make sure those braces are secure. We can't afford any weak points." Foster, meanwhile, monitored the structural integrity of the welds, ensuring that the two ships were bonding properly. "The readings are good so far," she reported. "The metals are fusing, but the alien metal's resisting in places. We need to reinforce the welds where the resistance is strongest." Bennett, ever the leader, coordinated their efforts, making sure every step was precise. "Take your time. We can't rush this. Once we're fused, we're committed." The welding process took several hours, crew working in shifts to ensure the job was done right. They installed additional braces at key points along the hulls, each one meticulously welded in place using the plasma cutter. The work was exhausting, both mentally and physically, but they knew there was no room for error. As they neared completion, the strain on the team began to show. Michaels's hands trembled slightly as he held the final brace in place. "This better hold," he muttered, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool temperature inside his suit. "It will," Bennett said, his tone confident. "We've come this far. We're not going to let a bad weld stop us now." Lee made the final weld, plasma cutter flaring brightly as it fused the metals together. When he was done, he stepped back and surveyed their work. "That's it," said, exhaustion creeping into his voice. "We're welded. The connection's solid." Foster double-checked the structural integrity one last time, her eyes scanning the data on her console. Everything checks out. We're secure. The ships are as one. Bennett allowed himself a small, relieved smile. Good work, team. We're not done yet, but this was the hard part. Now comes the fun part, Michaels said, a hint of nervous excitement in his voice. We get to fire up the thrusters and see if we can stop this thing. Not yet, Bennett said, expression serious. First, we need to run some calculations. We can't just fire the thrusters and hope for the best. We need to make sure we do this right. The crew returned to the Odyssey, where Foster began inputting the necessary data into the ship's computer. I'll need to calculate the exact thrust needed to slow us down without tearing the welds apart, she explained. We have to be precise, or the whole thing could fail. It's a delicate balance, Lee agreed. Too much thrust, and we risk breaking the connection. Too little, and we won't slow down enough. Bennett nodded. Take your time, Dr. Foster. We've waited this long. We can afford to be patient. As Foster worked on the calculations, the rest of the team prepared the Odyssey for the burn. They double-checked the fuel levels, ran diagnostics on the thrusters, and ensured that all systems were ready for the critical maneuver. Hours passed as Foster meticulously calculated the thrust needed to slow both ships. The weight of responsibility was heavy on her shoulders. One mistake could mean disaster. Finally, she finished her calculations and turned to Bennett. I've got it, she said, her voice steady. We'll need to fire the thrusters at 70% for 10 minutes. That should be enough to bring us to a stop without overloading the welds. Bennett nodded. Good work, Dr. Foster. Let's get this done. The team took their positions, each one focused and ready. Bennett, as commander, initiated the countdown. This is it, people. On my mark, we fire the thrusters. Stay sharp and be ready for anything. The seconds ticked by, the tension in the cabin palpable. Finally, Bennett gave the order. Engage thrusters, now. The Odyssey's thrusters roared to life, the ship vibrating as it pushed against the combined mass of both vessels. The force of the acceleration pressed the crew into their seats, the welds creaking under the strain. But they held. For 10 agonizing minutes, the thrusters burned, the ship shuddering as it fought to slow the alien vessel. The crew watched the readings anxiously, their eyes fixed on the data streaming across their consoles. Slowly, gradually, the velocity began to drop. 5 minutes, Foster announced, her voice tense. We're holding steady. The welds groaned, the connection strained, but they didn't break. The thrusters continued to fire, pushing both ships with relentless force. 2 minutes, Lee said, his hands gripping the armrests of his seat. We're almost there. The final minutes felt like an eternity, but at last, the countdown reached 0. The thrusters powered down and the ship settled into a new, slower trajectory. Foster exhaled, her body relaxing as the tension drained away. We did it, she said, her voice filled with relief. We slowed the ship. Bennett leaned back in his seat, a satisfied smile on his face. Good work, everyone. We're not done yet, but we're one step closer to unlocking the secrets of this vessel. Michaels grinned, the nervous energy giving way to excitement. We've made history today. Whatever happens next, we've already changed everything. As the crew caught their breath and processed what they had accomplished, a new sense of determination settled over them. They had welded their ship to an alien vessel, slowed its course, and taken the first step toward uncovering its mystery. The challenges ahead would be immense, but they were ready. They knew the next phase would be even more dangerous, more uncertain. They also knew they had to press on. For the sake of science, for the sake of humanity, they would delve deeper into the unknown, no matter the cost. With their plan set in motion and the alien ship now under control, crew prepared for the next chapter of their journey. The secrets of Oumuamua were waiting, and they were determined to bring them to light. The Odyssey was now firmly welded to the alien ship, technological bridge between humanity's achievements and an ancient, unknown civilization. The crew had completed the daunting task of securing the two vessels, ensuring that their journey home would be as safe as possible. The mysteries within the alien craft called to them, pulling them deeper into its secrets with every passing day. Dr. Evelyn Foster led the team back into the alien vessel, her helmet's light sweeping across the darkened passageways. The more time they spent inside the ship, the more they began to understand its layout. There were clearly defined sections. engineering, living quarters, and the massive bridge where they had found the skeletal remains of the alien crew. Despite their discoveries, the vessel remained an enigma, its technology and purpose still beyond their comprehension. "I've been thinking about those consoles we saw on the bridge," Foster said, her voice crackling over the comm. "There's something odd about them. No screens, no buttons. It's almost like they're waiting for a specific kind of input." "Like what?" Lieutenant Jack Michaels asked, his tone curious. "I don't know yet," Foster replied, "but we need to keep an open mind. This technology is far beyond ours, so it might not function the way we expect." "Just be careful," Commander Sam Bennett cautioned. "We still don't know what happened to the crew of this ship. Let's not end up like them." Dr. Marcus Lee, who had been scanning the ship's walls, added, "It's almost like this whole place is some kind of interactive environment. Maybe the consoles use holographic displays. That would explain why we haven't found any monitors." As they moved deeper into the ship, the air grew heavier, a sense of history pressing down on them. The corridors were eerily quiet, with only the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of their suit systems to break the silence. The remains of the alien crew were still a sobering sight, a grim reminder of the dangers they faced. After hours of exploration, they returned to the Odyssey to file their latest report with NASA. Foster began the transmission, summarizing their findings. "This is Dr. Evelyn Foster, reporting from the Odyssey. We've made significant progress in our exploration of the alien vessel. The ship is clearly of sentient design, with advanced engineering and technology. We found what we believe to be the bridge and the remains of the crew, but we have yet to determine the cause of their deaths." NASA's response was swift and direct. "Understood, Odyssey. Your findings are extraordinary, but we need to prioritize safety. We're instructing you to prepare both vessels for a return to Earth. Given the initial speed of the alien craft, this journey will take months, but we can't risk tearing the ships apart by pushing them any faster." Bennett acknowledged the order. "Copy that, NASA. We'll begin the return journey immediately. We'll continue our exploration during the trip and report any new finding." The crew set to work on the preparations for the long voyage home. The thought of returning to Earth with both vessels intact was daunting, but they knew it was their only option. They couldn't afford to let this opportunity slip away. The knowledge contained within the alien ship could revolutionize human understanding of the universe. As the Odyssey and the alien vessel began their slow journey back toward Earth, the crew established a routine. They made daily trips into the alien ship, carefully documenting everything they found. Each day brought new discoveries, though most were small and incremental. They noticed that the alien ship was devoid of the clutter typically found on human vessels. There were no loose tools, no signs of personal effects, save for the remains of the clothing they had discovered earlier. Everything seemed designed with a purpose, yet that purpose remained elusive. One day, as they were exploring the bridge once more, Michaels made a startling discovery. He had been examining the skeletal remains near the central console when he noticed something unusual clinging to one of the skulls. "Hey, take a look at this," Michaels called out. The others floated over, their helmet lights illuminating the object in question. It was a headset, or what appeared to be one. The device was sleek, with metallic bands that extended out like fingers, clearly designed to fit snugly around a skull. The tips of the fingers were embedded in the bone, suggesting a direct connection with the brain. Foster knelt beside the remains, examining the headset with a mix of awe and trepidation. "This must have been the captain's," she said. "Look at the way it's positioned, right in front of the main console. It's like it was designed to interface directly with the ship." "Check out this shape," Lee pointed out, gesturing to the elongated skull. "It's clearly not human. This species had a much different cranial structure. The headset's designed to fit that shape. Which means we'll need to modify it if we want to use it," Michaels said, his voice tinged with both excitement and fear. "But are we really going to try that?" Bennett's voice cut through the comms, firm and authoritative. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to understand what we're dealing with first. But yes, if this headset is some kind of control device, we might be able to learn a lot from it." The team carefully removed the headset from the skull, taking it back to the Odyssey for further study. Over the next several days, they began the delicate task of modifying the device. They reshaped the metallic fingers to fit a human skull, all the while theorizing about how the device might work. This could be some kind of neural interface, Foster speculated as she worked. If the aliens used it to control the ship, it must have allowed them to process a huge amount of information simultaneously. Maybe even communicate directly with the ship's systems. Or each other, Lee added. Imagine if they could share thoughts or memories directly. It would explain the lack of written language or other communication devices. Michaels, who was assisting with the modifications, glanced at Bennett. Are we really going to try this? NASA's not going to like it. Bennett nodded grimly. They've already told us it's too risky. But we're out here, and we're the ones who have to make the call. This headset can give us insight into the ship's systems. It's worth the risk, but we'll proceed with caution. As the modifications neared completion, the team also devised a plan to power up one of the consoles on the bridge. They brought a portable power module aboard the alien ship, carefully connecting it to the console's input port. It took several attempts, the connections stubborn and resistant. Finally, the module hummed to life. Suddenly, the dark, lifeless console flickered. Holographic projections burst into the air above it, displaying intricate patterns and shapes. The crew gasped as the alien technology came to life, casting an eerie glow throughout the bridge. Foster's eyes widened as she studied the hologram. It's a navigational map, she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. But these stars, I don't recognize any of them. Neither do I, Lee said, shaking his head. None of these constellations match anything in our catalog. This must be where the ship is from, a star system far beyond our reach. Bennett stared at the glowing map, his mind racing with the implications. If we can understand this map, we might be able to trace the ship's origins. First, we need more information, and that means using the headset. The team worked quickly, securing the portable power module to the captain's console and attaching the modified headset. The air was thick with tension as they prepared the final step. NASA won't like this, Michaels muttered, but we've come too far to back out now. Bennett glanced at his crew, then back at the console. We're doing this, he said, his voice resolute. I'll put the headset on. If it can interface with the ship, we might be able to unlock its secret. Foster hesitated, concern etched on her face. Sam, are you sure about this? We don't know what will happen. I'm sure, Bennett replied. We need answers, and this is the only way we're going to get them. With that, Bennett lowered himself into the captain's seat. The modified headset was positioned carefully over his head, the metallic fingers wrapping around his skull. The power module hummed softly, ready to supply energy to both the headset and the console. Foster took a deep breath. Powering up? Now. The power module activated, sending a surge of energy through the console and into the headset. Bennett's body tensed immediately, his muscles locking up as the neural interface took hold. His eyes rolled back in his head, and his hands gripped the armrests of the seat with white-knuckled intensity. Commander? Michaels shouted, panic rising in his voice. Sam, can you hear me? Bennett didn't respond. His entire body convulsed as if in a seizure, breathing ragged and strained. Crew watched in horror, unsure of what to do. Get that thing off him, Lee yelled, rushing forward. But as he tried to remove the headset, he found it stuck fast, the metallic fingers digging into Bennett's skull. It won't come off. We need to shut down the power module, Foster said urgently. He's in trouble? Before they could act, Bennett's convulsions abruptly ceased. His body relaxed, slumping back into the seat. Crew held their breath, waiting for any sign of life. Slowly, Bennett sat up. His eyes were still rolled back, the whites glowing faintly in the dim light. Then, without warning, he began to speak, a low, guttural voice that none of them recognized, speaking a language that was entirely alien. Foster's heart raced as she tried to comprehend what was happening. What is he saying? I don't know, Lee whispered, his voice trembling. But it's not English. It's not any language I've ever heard.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe and visit the channel for more interesting sci-fi stories and content.